Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric and Matt, and this is Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit, your beacon of freedom and the American way of life. Tune in every Friday for a new episode as we dive into the world of liberty and what makes our country great. All right, guys, happy Friday and welcome back. This is Eric and Matt here with LLP, and it's been a great week, and we hope you've all had a great week. And we're going to be diving into a really interesting subject. This might be controversial for some, but maybe not. We might hurt some feelings, but
perhaps we will. This
is the great caliber debate, and we're going to be going into some of our favorite rifle, pistol, and shotgun calibers and talking about compatibility. We'll talk about some of the weird ones, maybe some wildcats. We're going to really be diving into the deep weeds here on a ton of different things, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And people tend to have their good old standbys and their favorites and things that they always go back to in terms of calibers that they enjoy shooting. Always a lot of fun.
Did you hear that? I swear I heard somebody yelling 2 world wars somewhere.
Two world wars
came from somewhere, man. But this is, it's always like a spot of contention amongst firearms enthusiasts. And the unique thing about it is that it really allows you to show your individuality, and that's kind of like how gun guys or gun people, gun girls get it out. Like, they love to customize their guns, their rifles. They love to choose like the most obscure caliber possible to show that individuality. It's like, oh, what do you shoot? I shoot a Weatherby. Like, what is that? Like, oh, you have to hand load it, and it takes 3 months to get enough material to cast the bullet. I'm like, holy cow. So it's always super interesting to have that conversation with somebody and to see the enthusiasm and that sparkle in their eye when they actually get to explain it. And like, well, nobody ever lets me talk about this particular round, or it's just always makes for good conversation. You're not going to have 5 people sit around a campfire at hunting camp and not talk about the best cartridge for them and what they're shooting. It's just really neat. Before we jump in today's episode, we're going to talk about our show's sponsor, ExpressVPN. I know that if you're like me or like Eric, you take your online search history very seriously. You want to make sure that it's kept private and is not being sold to the highest bidder to force feed you ads. So I know most of you are probably thinking, why don't you just use incognito mode or some type of tool on your search engine? Those don't hide the data that goes to your ISP. ExpressVPN does. It's 100% encrypted end-to-end, so your data stays private and you don't have to worry about prying eyes looking into what you're looking at. It's an app that reroutes your internet connection through their secure servers, so your ISP can't see the sites you visit. 100% of your data is encrypted with the most powerful encryption available. Most of the time when I'm using it, I don't even notice it's on. I open my web browser, it automatically connects, and you're good to go. They also have an app on the phone, so you click the ExpressVPN button on your phone, your browser opens up, and you're protected. Anything you're looking for on your phone is protected. You're good to go. It's available on all your devices, including your smart TV. So if you have a smart TV and you're worried about, searching stuff on your smart TV, it's protected as well. Guys, protect your online activity today with a VPN that's rated #1 by CNET and Wired. Get 3 months free when you sign up. Visit our exclusive link, expressvpn.com/LLP. That's expressvpn.com/LLP, expressvpn.com/LLP. But yeah, Eric, I'm really excited about today's conversation about getting to really tell everybody and all of our viewers our favorites and really kind of add to that debate.
Yeah. There, as you said, there are a lot of different opinions out there. And at the end of the day, really nobody's wrong, right? You like what you like, and you might have your reasons for why you like a certain cartridge. And there's a few different reasons for why you might gravitate to a certain cartridge. One reason might be because maybe you just have a lot of particular rifles that might be chambered in one given cartridge, or maybe handguns. Like for handguns, I tend to gravitate to 9mm just because I got so much 9 and I have so many 9mm pistols and PCCs and things like that. And obviously, with an AR owner, you can't help but have a ton of 5.56 laying around, and 5.56 seems to be a very popular cartridge. Just because there's so many firearms chambered in it. There's over 20 million AR-15s out there, so of course, 5.56 is going to be a pretty popular contender.
And it's the NATO standard,
It is. And there's always going to be the school of thought where people, have that debate over, what's better, 5.56 or 7.62 by 39, your AK versus AR type of people. I find some usefulness in both. I really do enjoy shooting 7.62 by 39, and I will say, in this market, 7.62 by 39 has actually been much more affordable and available than 5.56. So,
Red Army standard.
In some cases, right? 7.62 by 39 can actually be purchased for less than 9mm right now. So 9 and 5.56 are just out the roof because the demand is so high. There's probably a larger proportion of Americans that own AR-15s than own AKs. Now, there's a lot of AKs in circulation, certainly not saying that's not the case, but another cartridge that's been very affordable right now is 5.45 by 39.
Yeah, we just spoke about that,
It's available, and it's out there. It's affordable. Same thing with 7.62 by 39. So sometimes a caliber choice might be out of necessity. Maybe someone has an SKS. They can't afford to buy an AK yet, and they bought their first SKS. And, obviously those shoot 7.62 by 39. So having a rifle that maybe you're limited on what you can afford and having to have the cheaper cartridge might be, just a nice byproduct of the gun you happen to own. That's cool. I do like 7.62 by 39. I think that for a close range cartridge, it does quite well. I do have an M77 Mark II all-weather Ruger that's chambered in 7.62 by 39.
You took a deer with that last season.
I did. I shot a deer with it this last year. I used the Federal Fusion 123 grain projectile, and it's a soft point. It did quite well. It was a 100-yard broadside shot on a big doe at 100 yards. Yeah. So that's like stretching the absolute furthest distance I would probably feel comfortable, taking an animal with 7.62 by 39. But she hopped over the fence and probably went maybe 50 feet, and it was a good humane shot, a good double lung, partial heart penetration. It was a good shot. And she did go a little ways, but I might have missed the heart, but I think I got both lungs. But 7.62 by 39 for its affordable price is certainly a decent small to medium game cartridge in terms of people that use it for that. I prefer 5.56, I think, overall, just for consistency. I mean, and for long range use, 5.56 certainly does a little bit better at longer ranges than 7.62 by 39.
I definitely agree with you. I think that there is like a ballistic coefficient there that just lends itself to be better with that 5.56 cartridge. 7.62 by 39. I think it's a good cartridge for if you understand the limitations of it and what it's used for. I think a lot of it is misinformation that was brought back from, a lot of military guys coming back from either Vietnam or even like the beginning stages of like the OIF campaign. You just heard a lot of like, oh, they're only good for 100 meters, or they tumble like as soon as they leave the barrel, they're keyholing, and a lot of that stuff. It's like it's simply not true. Now, does it happen occasionally? Yes, you do keyhole fairly close, but is it normal or standard on all AK platform rifles? I wouldn't think so, but
a well-worn example might not exactly stabilize the best.
Right. So when you're looking at it, there's so much misinformation that people tend to shy away from. They're like, well, I don't want that. I heard really bad things. Like, I don't want a round that doesn't stabilize, or it takes, let's just say it takes more than 100 meters to stabilize, and it's bad for close-in shots. So it's just a lot of misinformation. I think the round itself is good if you understand the limitations of the round, which you obviously do, because you said, hey, that's probably about as far as a shot as I would take humanely with that.
We have shot 7.62 by 39 out to some pretty extreme ranges. And when I say extreme, I would say, let's just say a range where the bullet doesn't tumble and doesn't destabilize. I mean, there is a point, right? Like 550 yards, maybe getting into 6 if you got some good hot ammo. That's a long way for a 7.62 by 39. We have shot them out to that range, and they can still retain some pretty decent accuracy and some good carrying energy. The 7.62 by 39 is nice because you do have a relatively heavy bullet. which does lend itself well to close range encounters. So for a close range, in the brush, in the thick stuff, a close range personal protection option. My dog's going nuts over here.
Yeah.
What are you doing, girl? It does lend itself quite well for that particular application. So that's why in wars like Vietnam, for instance, the VC fared quite well with the AK, because it's such a controllable rate of fire and a relatively heavy bullet.
It'll
And
go
good
through that
carrying
brush.
energy.
Yeah, it goes right through the brush, much
Right.
easier than the 5.56 at the time.
5.56 hits a tiny twig, goes off into the Blue Wonder. Not a very good in-close brush gun, but a better long-range gun, a little bit better performance for long-range shooting. So those two are always going to be a trade-off, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch in physics, right? Heavier bullets tend to carry their energy a little bit better and maintain good carrying energy at range. A bullet that's heavy for caliber, let's say you're shooting 154 grain 7.62 by 39. You're certainly getting into good carrying energy. I've killed a lot of pigs with 7.62 by 39 with the CMMG Mark 47 and the full 16-inch barrel, and getting full velocity out of a 154 grain soft point bullet. And this is ammo that I'm buying in 40-round sleeves from Wolf or Tula, right? The 154 grain soft point, which we've actually done ballistics gel testing on our channel. If you're watching on the video, we'll put a link down there for you to check out our ballistics gel test on that particular round. Now, the video's a little older, but the data should still give you an idea of the expansion and penetration, things like that, and the temporary and permanent cavities. If you're listening here on the podcast, make sure you check out some of our videos on it. But I've killed a lot of pigs with it, and I think the largest pig I killed was like maybe 220 pounds.
That's a big boy.
And with a 7.62 by 39, I got, double lung penetration. It did a good job. So when approached within the limitations of what a cartridge can do, any cartridge will do the job. People just tend to have their favorites. And I think right now, with the price of ammunition being what it is, a lot of people are gravitating to 7.62 by 39 just because of its lower cost. I mean, your average 5.56 ammo is sometimes $1 or more per shot, whereby I've seen 7.62 by 39 when I've been lucky enough to buy it cheap. As cheap right now, I think it's like 30 cents, maybe 35 cents a shot.
I've seen some steel case that is pretty inexpensive.
So, sometimes the economy of a round can be a attributing factor as to whether or not someone chooses that round over 5.56. Maybe somebody owns 2 or 3 ARs and they're like, man, I don't want to buy 5.56 right now. And then they buy like a 22 conversion kit for their AR to be able to shoot 22. That's a great option to save some money. And a lot of people gravitate to 22s for that reason.
And I'm glad you mentioned that about the cost of 7.62 by 39, because I absolutely do not understand the hysteria right now around 300 blackout. I mean, everywhere I go, it's almost like they assume that I'm going in to buy 300 blackout, because I'm like, oh, hey, I'm here to check out your ammo selection. They automatically, we're out of 300 blackout. I'm like, son, that never crossed my mind. I'm not here.
There certainly has been a run on 300.
Yeah, but I don't understand why. I mean, think about it. You're taking a round that is maximally effective out of a 9.5-inch barrel, shooting a 30 cal at triple the cost of a 7.62 by 39. For what? Like, to me, it just doesn't make sense, one, financially,
right,
or ballistic coefficiently.
I think I can possibly explain the reason. All right.
Elaborate.
I think the reason is my dog is chewing up my table. She just carried off a piece of my table. That's
hilarious.
All right. She's a good girl. We'll let her chew on the table. I think the reason is because there's a lot less 300 loaded than other calibers, right? So the reason the price on 7.62 by 39 is what it is because they load so much of it and they import so much of it, right? The labor costs are cheaper overseas.
Getting repacks.
Yeah, exactly. So they're loading more 7.62 by 39 than 300 blackout for one. Two, 5.56 is what it is because the demand is high. It's not that the demand isn't high for 300, but because most of your 300 ammo is probably produced domestically and they use brass case usually. I think for a while Wolf was loading 300 blackout, but I haven't seen much of it around.
I've actually never seen it personally.
I'm pretty sure Wolf and Tula make 300 blackout ammo, but the problem is once it hits here, it probably sells so quick they probably, again, load considerably less. Now, if they loaded as much 300 blackout overseas as they did 7.62 by 39, well, then the price of 7.62 by 39 would be as cheap, or 300 would be as cheap as 7.62 by 39. I think that's the reason. It's just they don't load as much of it, therefore the price per round is going to be, it's just simple economics at that point. The demand might be there, but maybe not at the level it is for 5.56 and the 7.62 by 39.
Yeah.
That's probably why.
Yeah, and then, I think 300 blackout is served by a very certain niche of customer that they absolutely love 300 blackout. It's like the
It's a
old
good cartridge.
It's like the old joke is like, how do you know someone shoots 300 blackout? They'll tell you. It's like
Well,
they're very adamant about it.
I'm here to tell you, 110 grain Barnes triple shock out of a 300 blackout, moving at good full velocity and throw a can on it just to knock the edge off. It's pretty awesome.
It is. There's no doubt about it.
It's a good cartridge.
No doubt about it. But think of all the variables that you have to appease in order to get that performance. Like you have to have an SBR or a pistol. You have to have a can. You have to have the certain ammo loaded to a certain spec. I'm like, this is a lot. This is a lot to deal with.
Well, you get into some of these other kind of oddball AR cartridges, and we'll kind of talk about those a little bit. One, you've seen a lot of military units, primarily like your special forces and rangers and, kind of operator type, switching back to 6.8 spec. Mm-hmm. Okay. A 6.8 basically uses a 270 diameter projectile, like your good old 270, like your 270 Winchester, except I think lighter pills.
Yeah.
Okay. So the 6.8 has some really great potential. It's got a good heavy bullet, good carrying energy, good case capacity, decent magazine capacity still, and a standard AR-15 sized magazine. A lot of people have really, had a lot of good luck with the carrying energy of 6.8 spec, and there's lots of military units that are, trying to experiment with switching back to 6.8. Of course, there's been a ton of people that have gravitated to like the 6.5 Grendel, which is great. So if you're not familiar with 6.5 Grendel, if you're familiar with 6.5 Creedmoor, all right, it's sort of like a tiny 6.5 Creedmoor. It's a short action 6.5 that can fit in a standard short action AR-15 magazine. I believe you do have to use specialized mags that are optimized for 6.5 Grendel, if my memory serves. I do have one 6.5 Grendel rifle. Brandy hunts with it, and it's great. Smooth shooting, real flat trajectory. And that's one benefit that you get with the 6mm and the 6.5s is you do get down to a very good a high ballistic coefficient that really trumps the wind well and carries well. And they're great for long range shooting, especially if you set them up in a good full length AR that's got a good floated rail system and a good trigger and a nice optic on there and good stock. You can really get some pristine accuracy, and it's really like the way to stretch out the range potential on a short action AR-15, like the 6mm ARC and the 6mm AR, which is the Wildcat version of 6mm ARC. Those really represent like the culmination of the best ballistic principles of what a short action AR can offer without having to go to a larger platform. In my opinion, 6mm ARC, outside of the Wildcat, actually 6mm AR has better case capacity. You can actually load the rounds a little bit. You can get a little more steam out of them than you can the 6mm ARC, to be fair. But from a SAMI spec standpoint of a SAMI spec cartridge, the 6mm ARC is certainly, I believe, the apex of what a short action AR cartridge can do.
Yeah, and I think
it's accurate.
I think that for the longest time, 6mm, I believe it was the Swiss that were dealing with the 6mm first, right?
Well, so let me tell you, it's kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
The military actually issued a 6mm rifle a long time ago.
Okay.
6mm Lee Navy. It was a straight pull. Okay, so it uses this really funky straight pull bolt, and it used a round nose 6mm projectile. And let me look up here and see when the 6mm Lee Navy was around, because it's been a good minute. So the thing is early on they had the 6mm Lee Navy, and it never really caught on. But
Which
here,
is weird,
here we are in 1895. All right, you're talking cartridge that was developed in 1895. It was called the 6mm U.S. Navy, or 236 Navy, which of course was not used very long. It fell out of favor pretty quickly. But you're talking on the light end, a 75 grain bullet moving at 3,300 feet per second. So here we are with the U.S. military in 1895. They had the idea. It was right there. It was in their grasp, you know. They had the right idea of this 6mm small bore but full power cartridge. I mean, there you are. Like, look at all of the velocity that you can chase.
I was going to say, that thing's screaming for that age and that technology.
1,800 foot-pounds of energy, man. Like, they had the right idea. And then you get into the 112 grain projectile moving at 2560. And I guarantee you, once if they would have switched that to a Spitzer bullet, now you're talking, right? So 6mm was not a new concept for a small bore rifle. It just... Maybe they just didn't have as the quality of propellants.
That's what it comes down to. I think that the innovation was ahead of the technology. So the idea was right. The idea was correct. And that's proven today because it's proven like all of the ELR guys are shooting 6mm. Like they are hitting out like a mile, mile and a half. More now. Yeah. So, I mean, they're hammering targets like I think a guy just hit a 2 mile target. Yeah. I was like, my God. But
to be fair, the Lee Navy also had a real complicated bolt that, you know, you had to be, it was not a very good military rifle.
Well, that's what I was referring to, like the technology and propellants and rifling and materials. Think about the pressures that gun had to endure with the powders that they were using. It was probably over pressured. Now we have all types of metallurgy going on. We're able to contain that pressure in a much smaller, lighter footprint. And you're seeing it now across the board with long range shooting, ELR competitions. And even, I mean, if you can get, I would be very interested to see if they're able to squeeze that into like a smaller system, like even like an AR style system that's like more of a semi-automatic versus bolt.
Right. Well, when you get into the 6mm AR and the 6mm arc, those are what you're accomplishing. You're getting a small bore, short action cartridge. It really does, you know, get the maximum amount of steam that you can out of a short action in an AR. That's really your only limiting factor is going to be the size of the magazine and how much of a projectile and cartridge you can fit into
and
it.
The weight of the cartridge. Like I think they're switching over to polymer casings now. Yep. At least they were with the 6.8. So they were talking about doing the new squad automatic weapon, which is a 6.8. Yeah. Polymer casing. I would be very curious to see when they switch over like the main battle rifles. Are they going to continue to use the polymer casing with the magazines and help reduce the weight? Because I think they achieved something like a 25% decrease in weight just by switching to polymer casing.
And that's a big deal. You know, when you think about transport costs of moving the ammunition from one place to the other, it may not necessarily be. I mean, sure, the end result is that the soldier has a little bit less weight to carry, therefore can carry, let's just say theoretically, more ammunition, right? For the same loadout in terms of how much it weighs, right? But also transport costs, right? I mean, the lighter you can make your ammo to transport, the cheaper it is to transport. So there is that economic factor that goes into play. As we move on, it's worth mentioning, I believe, that the AR has stood the test of time. It has proven to be one of the most modular and useful platforms, arguably in the world. I mean, they are very easy to work on and service and use, and they're very easy to mess with different calibers, and they have really proven to be a great, accurate, soft shooting, soft recoiling platform that will continue to be prevalent for another century.
Absolutely.
A century from now, people will be making AR parts because it really is a great gun design. And there's a lot of other technical wonders that we have access. I mean, look at all the great bullpups that have been coming out. I mean, you look at the stuff from IWI, and the guys at Desert Tech are doing a great job with the MDR and stuff. So, you know, those guns are the future. I think bullpups and more compact rifles are the future. But also these calibers, right? Small, fast, compact, high ballistic coefficient. I mean, you look at the 6mm Creedmoor, which I don't know exactly when the 6mm Creedmoor came out, but I've got the window to the world right here. I'm going to
Well,
look it up.
that's what I was looking up because you said bullpups, and actually one of the weapons that were submitted to replace the M4 or M16 was by General Dynamics. It's a bullpup in 6.8, while the other two weapon systems are more conventional non-bullpups. I personally don't know if the military is going to be able to make that switch because it's a completely different manual of arms, completely different as far as like speed reloads. I like bullpups if it's a bolt gun. Well, even the MDR is a really, really nice gun, but as far as having that confidence to when you go into a room and if you have a malfunction or you have to speed reload, it's still kind of a wonky maneuver because you have to pull the weapon up, rest it, and everything is different. So I just don't know if the bullpup rifle has a place as far as replacing the standard battle rifle in the military. Is it a great concept with technology? Yes, because you can fit a 20-inch rifle into a 16-inch
into a
footprint.
size of an M4.
It's amazing how much more barrel you get just by moving some stuff around.
And we all know velocity is the name of the game.
Yes.
Especially with small bore, especially with 5.56. If we're limiting ourselves to 5.56, velocity is certainly the name of the game. And when you go from like a 12.5 and you can go to a bullpup that has a 20-inch barrel and almost maybe about the same size as a standard M4, now you're cooking with Crisco because now you're getting that velocity, and velocity is certainly what you want with small bore.
Yeah, and to get that package in there, but the main thing is just being comfortable with the gun, getting comfortable with the manual of arms and malfunctions and stuff like that. If they can implement it and get everybody comfortable with it, great. But I do think that General Dynamics has a very tough road to hoe as far as breaking into and getting into that industry.
For sure. And I think that another area of consideration is you've also got to train armors.
Yes.
You've got to change all of your supply over. So, changing a cartridge is a big deal for the military to do, right? Because think about how much stores they have of random 5.56 ammo. Like that was one of the reasons during World War II when they developed the M1 Garand. I think it was MacArthur went back to him and was like, no, we don't want this 276 Peterson. Which would have been a great cartridge. But then you've got to buy all this ammo and store it and get it to the front and do all these things. But they had tons of M2 ball laying around from the Alt-6s, from the Springfield 03s and whatnot. So they're like, no, make it an 8-shot and change it to 30 Alt-6. So they made some minor changes to the gas system and the overall setup, and they made it work with M2 ball.
Yeah, they lost 2 rounds of capacity.
The rest is history. But with the 276 Peterson, the original Garand was a 10-shot. And then when they switched to Alt-6, they lost 2 rounds. But MacArthur was smart. He realized that they had all that Alt-6 ammo, and that made supply so much easier because they already had the ammo, good to go. Train the armors, get tooled up, get your spare parts. You got your ammo, bam, off you go.
And no one's arguing against black tip, all right?
Oh, yeah. Well, black tip does what it wants when it comes to that. So
that was the one beauty. They had a ton of it laying around, and trust me, no one's hiding behind trees feeling safe on that.
I like the 30-06 a lot.
I love it.
My grandpa hated the 30-06. He was not a big fan of it. He used to hunt with it. He lost so many deer with 30-06. I think it was just because of his shot placement not being so good.
I would tend to agree because I didn't lose a single deer the entire season. And it was like a one shot for every single one of them. That 30-06 it performed amazing. And I fell in love with the cartridge. So that was actually the first time that I shot 30-06. To that point, I normally used 308. And Eric recommended, he was like, hey man, let's take out this 30-06. Let's see how you do with this Mauser. And I just, boom, fell in love with it. I'm a believer. I don't think that there is a better deer hunting cartridge on this planet than a 30-06.
I mean, so we can talk about that a little bit. So with the 30-06, one thing that I kind of not really pressured Matt to do, but my recommendation was for us to start running the 220 grain pills. So this goes back to when we did the brush gun video, and we were shooting through really thick brush, and we were using heavy for caliber bullets to try to see kind of, how it would work, right? And we found that the heavier bullets did great in brush. And I started hunting with the 220 grain soft point core locks from Remington, and I think also some of the Federal 220s as well.
Power Shock.
The Power Shock. And I had a great experience with them. I found that every deer that I shot with the 220s, it was just like a jackhammer. It just floored them.
Oh, yeah.
It floors them
yeah.
with good shot placement. Now, if you don't get a good shot, the only other issue with that heavy bullet is that in order to get the bullet to expand really well, you have to get a good broadside shot in a perfect location. If you shoot a small body deer in a bad location, it'll just poke a clean hole through and it won't really expand. So that's the only issue. When you get into the 9.3 by 62 and the 9.3 by 57, which I love those cartridges. I've got a 9.3 by 62 that I haven't had a chance to take deer hunting yet. I got it right after deer season, but you better believe, opening day whenever we get out to go deer hunting, I am running my 9.3 by 62. But I have to deal with the same challenges that you do with the 220 grain bullets in the Alt-6 because without proper shot placement, and especially on a smaller deer, you can lose the deer. You know, if you don't get a good shot. So shot placement is still crucial. But I like the heavy bullets because they bunk the little twigs and brush and things really well, and they just hit like a freight train. And with good shot placement, I shot an 8-pointer with my Alt-6 this last winter in a place we call the Devil Stand. And the reason I call it the Devil Stand is because it's this weird, like, out in front of the deer stand, there's this old, like, pond bed that goes out, and it's an empty, dried-out pond bed. And it's just, like, weird little go-between. Like we put a salt block out there and we pour the corn around it, and one guy made the distinction. He was like, it looks like some weird witch cult lives out here,
pagan ritual place.
Yeah, a ritual. So we started calling it the Devil Stand. Anyway, I shot this 8-pointer with my 220 grain bullets out of my Mauser, and I shot him, and it was probably an 80-yard shot, and I got a great shot right in the boiler room. And I thought maybe that I'd gotten a bad shot, but I fired the shot, and the way that he reacted, it was just kind of shrugged a bit, and it almost looked like he shrugged it off a bit. And I thought, man, did I get a bad shot? I was worried. You know, when you fire a shot at a deer, you always want to wait a second. You don't go chase him. And I always learn to shoot and then listen. All right, so I'll always shoot. And then I'll work the action real quick and get around in there again in case I have to shoot again. But then I'll be really quiet and I'll just listen. And I heard him kind of stumble, and then I heard him fall down. So you always want to listen because a lot of times you'll hear him fall. And then when I went back down to retrieve my deer, sure enough, right through the boiler room, really good blood trail, he stumbled 30 feet. I mean, and it was a very clean and effective round to use in that particular type of situation. I'm a big fan of heavy pills, but the nominal bullet weight for 30-06 is usually like in the 150 grain range. So at 220s, that's heavy medicine. That's a heavy pill.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen them go anywhere between 150, 165, 180.
200s.
Yeah, but that 220, I love it. I mean,
So-
you made a believer out of me because I always thought, I was like, man, I'll do a 185, get a little bit more distance. And then Eric was like, well, I mean, you're not really going to be hitting anything over, say, 150 at this particular farm. So I'm like, all right, well, let's do a 220. We zeroed the rifle for 220. And, man, it only took a couple, and I was a believer on that one.
Yeah. I mean, you know, that's the cool thing about the 30-06, though. It is like the ultimate chameleon cartridge because you can go all the way down to 110 grain accelerators, all the way up to 220s, maybe a little heavier. You might get a 230 to stabilize if you got a fast enough twist. But that's the cool thing about it. The 30-06 will do it all. And the cool thing about Alt-6 is that the case capacity on Alt-6 starts to get close, if not rival, 300 Winchester Magnum. The only difference is 300 Winchester Magnum can handle a lot more pressure and can be loaded to much hotter pressures. And generally, the nominal weights on those, I want to say, are like 165 to 180. So a 300 Win Mag is made to go a little heavier and a little hotter than Alt-6. But the case capacity, if you've got a gun that can handle the pressure in an Alt-6, you can certainly get an Alt-6 moving pretty good. And as long as your shoulder can handle the recoil, you can certainly get some good performance out of a 30-06. And I think very highly of it. I know here in Georgia, there's a heck of a lot of hunters now that are using like 7mm Magnum.
Yeah.
And lots of hunters use 7mm Mauser still, which that's a great caliber. It's a good flat shooting cartridge, good bullet weights. I want to say you're getting around 140 grain bullet in a 7mm, so still good velocity, lots of velocity, a good high ballistic coefficient, good trajectory. So a good medium range hunting cartridge for sure. That'll still perform great at 150 yards, close in. But if you need to take a 300-yard shot, it's certainly going to have the carrying energy and a very flat trajectory to do the job for sure.
And that's what knowing your hunt and knowing your game comes into your ammo selection. So obviously, if we went out and we were hunting and we knew that we were going to be taking 300-yard shots as a normal, we probably wouldn't use 220s. We'd probably load up some 165s, 185s, something that gives you a little bit more oomph at a longer range.
But without having a marshmallow falling out of the sky,
it looks like it's lobbing in. If you shoot far enough, you'll just kind of see it lob in there.
Yeah.
But as far as hunting cartridges go, you can't really debate that. It's a tried and true cartridge. Lots of versatility there.
Like in the 9.3 by 62, they call it like the 9.3 by 57. They would call it like the potato launcher because it's such a heavy bullet, and I think it's a 250 and sometimes a 265 or 270 grain bullet. So the 9.3 uses a huge heavy bullet. And it does have a very elliptical trajectory, but it's really meant to hunt very large game within like a few hundred yards. Most people in Scandinavia or even here in North America, the cartridge has gotten a lot more respect over the last 10 or 20 years than what it had initially. 9.3 by 62 is a good large game 200-yard hunting rifle. Maybe with a good shooter, 250 would be possible, but I think most people are going to try to shoot within a few hundred yards with that.
Yep. And not to ignore our NATO brethren with the 7.62 by 51. No slouch with hunting. Lots of people use it. I would probably say that's the most common rifle hunting cartridge used. Is like a 308.
Lots of people run 308, and one of the benefits of having a 308 is, let's say that you're a fan of, like, maybe you got a SCAR, maybe you got a FAL.
AR-10.
Or an AR-10.
Yeah.
And let's say you like to go out and do, long-range matches or something, or you just enjoy taking your AR-10 out and shooting it. Or maybe you want to hunt with your AR-10. That's perfectly capable too. But a lot of people might have an auto loader, like we mentioned, and then maybe a bolt gun as well. So that's cool because you can keep the same ammunition on hand for your bolt gun or for your auto loader. And I know Brandy hunts with a Kimber 84M, and it's a 308. And we use the 150 grain Superformance from Hornady. And that round, I've yet to have a deer walk away from it. It drops them right in their tracks with good shot placement. So 308 is a very, very good hunting cartridge, especially, I think a lot of people tend to kind of he and haw over 308 because there are so many better long-range cartridges. There was a point when people would treat a bolt gun in 308 kind of like let's just say a long-range hunting rifle, or maybe for military purposes, right? Military snipers would run 308 bolt guns because a long time that was the norm, right? That's just what they had.
Standard.
But there was a point where we didn't have 6mm Creedmoor and 6.5 Creedmoor, or even 300 Winchester Magnum wasn't thought of in that capacity. Now, there are, of course, a lot of Alaskan hunters and other big game hunters that were using 300 Winchester Magnum for a long time. It didn't really fall into military use for quite some time. It took a while to come around. But 308, it's been on the chopping block quite a while. So I think for hunting purposes, 308 is a great cartridge because, you're not going to shoot at an animal 800 or 900 yards away or 1,000 yards away. Now, you might. Some people do some long-range shots that have guns that are set up really, really well. I think that's kind of stretching it for 308.
I believe so.
For a humane hunting situation. But 308 can certainly offer really humane potential on game animals, inside of 500.
I was going to say about 500 is probably where.
You're getting a little more, carrying energy, and you can certainly perform a much more humane shot on an animal than you could with like 45-70 or 444 or a 220 grain 30-06 at that distance.
And I know I can already hear the Marines yelling at the computer screen. We qualify at 500 with M4s or M16s, and this is true. Army qualifies at 300. But what we're referring to is being able to put a 30 caliber pill or a 7.62 by 51 pill in a very specific spot on a very specific animal.
Facing a very specific way.
Yep. At 500 yards, and you have about 4 inches to work with.
Yep.
So when you say, I have to hit a 40-inch target at 500 meters anywhere on the black is one thing.
Yeah.
But to hit a 4-inch circle at 500 with a 7.62 by 51, it's a little bit of a different animal.
I agree, and I think that when you look at that aspect of it, the way I would treat it is that when you look at, let's say, a 10-inch pie plate, not the larger paper plates that you see, but like the old traditional pie plates with the little fringes on the outside, a little bit smaller, right? They're about 10 inches. If you can't take a rifle and put a pie plate up on a board and hit that pie plate with confidence, you don't need to take a shot at an animal with it. That's the way I've always treated it. So let's say the hunt calls for, and I didn't necessarily want this podcast to be just about hunting, but
we're going to switch to
hunting on the brain.
Yeah, well, we're going to switch to handgun calibers here after this.
We are. We do have hunting on the brain.
Oh yeah.
But if you can't, if the hunt calls for offhand shot, well, guess what? You need to be able to shoot a 10-inch plate offhand at whatever distance you think you're going to do it. And if you can't do it, you don't need to hunt, or you need to practice more and get better, right? Or use a shooting stick or stabilize the gun or get down in the prone, do whatever you need to do to perform the humane shot that you need to perform. So I think that there's a lot of minutia gets looked at when it comes to rifle calibers. Pistol calibers, I did briefly mention that I prefer 9mm just because I got so many different 9mm handguns, but there's a ton of great pistol cartridges, and some of them have such cool history, and some of them just have a great functional use. Like I know in the beginning of the podcast, you kind of took a little stab at World War II. I guess you were talking about 45 ACP.
Yep. They all
Two
fall
World Wars,
to
right?
the 45 ball.
What was that?
They all fall to the 45 ball.
Right. What I like about 45, and let's just say modern times as we look at it now, is that almost all, if not all, the 45 ACP, especially out of a 8 or less inch barrel in a PCC or something, it's all subsonic. Mm-hmm. So if you throw a can on, it's a great subsonic shooting platform to keeping everything quiet.
This is true.
Or if you've got a 45 ACP handgun with a suppressor, they are so quiet and they suppress so well. And I love hearing those 230 grain projectiles hitting a piece of steel when the gun has made hardly no sound. It's like, ding! It's just so loud. So 45 has its uses, right? Now, would someone, you could still carry a 45 if you want. Plenty of people still carry 1911s and other firearms chambered in 45 ACP. I have no problem with that. Like, it's a good hard-hitting cartridge. It's accurate. I mean, believe me, there's something to be said about a big heavy pill just piling through and hitting what it wants.
So much damage.
But I think the biggest benefit now is suppressing them.
Yep, suppressing them, but I understand the design and the drawbacks of the design with it being a bit dated, but the performance that you can squeeze out of that and the accuracy that you get out of it, out of the box, the slimness of it, everything about it, not outside of the nostalgia, just say like in general, let's just say you didn't know that was a 1911, like you completely knew, and you're just picking the gun up. It feels good in the hand.
Yeah.
It fits the hand. It's a slim profile.
Yeah.
The weight is good. That helps with the recoil impulse because it's a heavier firearm. You're not getting jackhammered by like a 10mm Glock made out of, plastic. So, I mean,
which I love the 10mm, by the way.
It's a great caliber, but when you have something that's designed around that caliber, it's made to absorb the impulse, the recoil impulse. It's super accurate. You can finesse the trigger. So many options. I mean,
dude,
I love the 1911. I think it's a great gun.
It's hard to argue with how awesome a 1911 is. Like when it comes to just going to the range and having fun, like there is nothing better than a well-tuned 1911 with a good barrel in it and a good trigger. And man, just watching those rounds hit the same spot every time and just shooting a good group with them. I probably would not want a 1911, let's just say as a combat unit. They probably have their quirks. All right. That's just the fact of the matter. It is a dated gun. I do like the 1911 though. There was it took the Marine Corps a long time to get back away from the 1911 and get back to 9mm.
Marsoc was using them like till the end. Like
That's
those
right.
guys were like, they would not let go of them.
Look, the 45 ACP is a great cartridge, and the 1911 is a great gun. I have no problems with it. Now, would it be my first choice if I was going into a sticky situation? No, I think I'd probably prefer a gun with some more capacity, so like a good 9mm. I really love the SIG M17. I think that's a great choice. I love the Glock 19X. Those two guns are fantastic. A few of my favorite handguns. Good capacity. Now with all of the great bullet technology that we got better propellants now. There's absolutely no reason why 9mm can't stand toe-to-toe with some 40 cal rounds in terms of energy and everything like that. I like 40 cal. There's always going to be this debate between people that like 40 and people that like 9. And look, the thing is, if you like it, run it. If you can shoot it good, run it. No one's going to judge anybody, right? I remember when I came across a whole bunch of Winchester Ranger T, all right, which is basically reboxed or rehashed, rebranded Black Talon. It's kind of that same type. It's a very similar projectile to the Black Talon. I bought a bunch of Winchester Ranger T 40 cal, 180 grain, and I think I paid, and this is 50 round LE boxes.
Ooh, boy.
I paid $16 a box for them. Now, what did you think that I did with that? I went and I bought a 40 cal handgun. You better believe it, because I wanted to have the ability to have a good carry gun in 40 cal. In fact, I think I bought a Glock 27 and I bought a CZ chambered in 40 cal. And I love them. 40 is great, man. It's got a ton of energy. It's a great cartridge. It's a really great way to bridge the gap between the high-speed 9mm and the really, high-speed heavy bullets that you see in a 10mm.
Yep. I was gonna say it's a little bit slower. It's a slower moving projectile it being, but I think
it's got energy.
Yeah, I was gonna say it gets a bad rap because it's you only hear about people either that shoot 9mm or 45/10mm, but not a lot of people shoot 40.
A lot of people do. They just don't make a big deal about it.
Or they don't let you know.
Well, you got to think, for a long time, the police were carrying 40s, and that was sort of like the caliber for them. We won't get into the development of 40 cal from 10 millimeters. Like, it came down to FBI agents that couldn't qualify with 10 mil. So they had to make the 40 cal to make the recoil a little bit less so people could shoot it more accurately. I personally love the 10 millimeter.
I think it's a great cartridge. I think it's a great cartridge. You know what else is very interesting and unique is the FK.
Oh yeah, the 7.5
7.5 FK.
Yeah, that's a really interesting cartridge, and that's a new development. It hasn't been around very long. You're talking a handgun cartridge that can penetrate soft body armor at 100 yards.
I mean, it is on the larger side, but look what you're getting out of it. You're getting a hard-hitting pistol caliber essentially not a carbine, but it's a pistol caliber out of a handgun.
It's a bottleneck cartridge.
It's a bottleneck cartridge.
What I want to see is an AR chambered.
That's
in that
what
cartridge.
I remember. We talked about that before. I said that would be ludicrous. That would be like a 5.7 on steroids,
dude. An 8-inch
That's basically
or a 10-inch
what it is.
barrel with a suppressor and the 7.5 FK. Woo, buddy. I mean, those 100 grain pills, man, it is such a great cartridge, and I can't wait. I know eventually you'll see some ARs chambered.
I'm waiting on something. I'm like, somebody, please make this.
The FK Bruno pistol is really awesome, but it is a niche kind of thing that may not really appeal to every single person and fit every single set of circumstances. They do have braces for them now and stocks, which is kind of cool.
I think I might try to take a deer with one.
Yeah.
Maybe this season.
They're good guns, man.
I'll get out at like one of the closer stands.
Boy, they're good guns.
Yeah,
man. They're really cool. So that's a great observation. I have a CMMG Banshee in 10 millimeter. We were actually talking about that earlier, maybe on one of the short stands. I think it has a 10-inch barrel, so you're definitely getting some steam and velocity to have a 10 millimeter. I might throw a good optic on that thing, and maybe this year we'll try to take a deer with a 10 millimeter just to show how effective it is. We'll try to film it. So quickly, I want to change directions to shotguns because I know.
Oh, I love shotguns.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time left, but we've got a few minutes to discuss shotguns. Okay. So I love shotguns, and I'm a big fan of semi-auto shotguns. And of course, I tend to really gravitate to 12 gauge. Now, when it comes to shotguns, it seems like some people just have their niches in there that they really enjoy. Some people are 410 types. They really enjoy the 410. Some people like 20 gauge and 16 gauge. Some people like pounding out some 10 gauges. I mean, I love 10 gauge.
You don't have a shoulder left after that.
Yeah, a lot of recoil. But I think, pound for pound and dollar for dollar, most people with shotguns tend to gravitate to the just good old standard 12 gauge because it is such an industry standard, and so many guns are chambered in 12 gauge.
Yep. A lot of versatility, a lot of rounds that you can choose from.
Yeah.
If you think about it, and also the thing that really, really works for 12 or for shotguns in general, 12 gauge being the most, most used.
Yep. There's most of it out there for sure.
You can load your own shells very easily. It's not so reloading in general can be a very daunting thing to try to take up and learn because you start having to learn weights and all this stuff. But really, if you want the easiest barrier to entry would probably be a shotgun because you can get the shells. You're using the primers, but you're not it's not super, super scientific to get it done. Yes, you need to weigh it out, but it's not nearly as hard or the learning curve of loading actual brass and bullets.
Yeah, shot shell, a lot of people load trap loads and they get really great value for their money. You could buy an 8-pound keg of promo and get a bunch of holes, and you're in business, buddy. You can get a ton of shotgun rounds out of an 8-pound keg of promo.
And you can use anything you want as fodder. You can use dimes, pennies, tacks, nails. You're not going to have a barrel left after you keep using it, but think about the versatility of it. If you're man, I don't have any actual buckshot or lead. Yeah. I'm going to throw some freaking nails in this thing, get some little carpet nails, and you just send those things downrange.
A shotgun is kind of like the ultimate cannon.
It's really cool,
smooth
man.
bore, cylinder bore shotgun, like a good single shot or pump action is you can throw anything in it, and it's awesome. But I love 12 gauge because of the versatility. I love the different buckshot sizes. You can get so much that you can do with it. And I love shotgun slugs. It's just an absolute amount of a visceral energy. I'm a big fan of the Bernicki Black Magic.
Oh, I love it.
It's got a barrel on the box. A 1 3/8 ounce slug moving at, I think they're stroking out of there at about 1,500 feet per second.
Screaming.
All right, look. I'm going to do a quick energy calculation on that because now we know.
So while you're doing that energy calculation, I'm going to shout out a YouTube channel that if you're into shotguns, you need to watch, which is Tal Flaudermaus.
Yeah, he does a lot of random stuff.
Those guys will do the most craziest random shotgun loads. And this is really where it's entertainment because you get to see the Bola rounds. So they have Bola rounds. They have custom slugs sent to them from guys in Russia that are milling this stuff out. All different types of loads. I enjoy watching it. It really lets you see the versatility of a shotgun. And whatever you want to do, whatever you want to try to load up and experiment with, they've probably already done it. So go check them out and learn something. And then you can say, well, dang, I'm going to go pick up a shotgun now because I had no idea that I could do all this stuff with the shotgun. And if you think about it, it is the ultimate SHTF firearm because you can pick up anything around the house and throw it in there and someone's going to have a bad day.
Let's see here. All right, so on that bear slug, 601 grain slug moving at, let's just call it an even 1,500 feet per second. You're talking a 12 gauge round that yields 3,000 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. So when you think about the world of guns, right, that's a pretty miraculous thing. That's a lot of energy.
It's a Foster slug.
A lot of people tend to. It is a Foster slug. It's actually a hardened alloy. It uses a heavy linotype construction, so it's real hard and it penetrates through bone and everything. It's made for to kill bears. You know what I mean? It's a substantial slug. Yeah. But that's one thing I love so much about 12 gauge. It's just the visceral energy dump that you can get. There are certainly rifle cartridges that can yield that type of foot-pounds. But I don't know, man. You'd have to get almost into a stopping rifle to get into that type of territory, right? So if we get into a, for instance, let's compare that to 458 Winchester Magnum, okay? I can probably just pull up the spec on that real quick here. All right, 458 Winchester Magnum. Relatively entry-level big game hunting cartridge. But don't get me wrong, a bruiser, right? Let's compare those energies. Now, getting into a 500 grain bullet, you're getting into 5,300 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. But that's also a specialized hunting rifle, and it does that one thing, and it does it really well. But to think a shotgun can yield, 3,000 foot-pounds of energy, that's a pretty destructive slug going down range. It's a giant hole, right? So I love shotguns and the variety of different cartridges that you can shoot. In a 12 gauge, you got birdshot and buckshot and all different types of things and slugs. It's just such a versatile gun that can do a lot of different things. I mean, beanbag rounds, rubber buckshot, less than lethal, breaching rounds. You can shoot locks off doors. I mean, there's so many things that the 12 gauge. Yeah, dragon's breath. So there's so many cool things that the 12 gauge can do. So I think if you do like messing around with different cartridges and playing around with them, shotguns are an awesome way to get into that, man. You can really do a lot with it. Whereby, let's say a 9mm or a 5.56, I mean, this AR, it is what you see unless you swap the upper and change around and convert and whatever. But the 12 gauge is cool because you can have one single shot 12 gauge if you want, and then just stuff a bunch of random stuff in it and have fun with it.
And there's no other gun I would rather have shooting down a hallway than a 12 gauge shotgun.
I'm telling you,
and trust me, the person on the receiving end, yes, the shotgun is a slow moving slug or it's buckshot. It's not going to penetrate armor. It's not going to defeat body armor. But you don't have to, because I promise you, if you hit somebody square in the chest plate, they are not going to just pop back up. It's not the movies. They're going to have broken sternum, broken ribs. They are going to be jacked up. So don't try it.
I'm a big fan of the Bernickis.
Yeah.
Berniki has a couple of different. They have their Special Forces Barrier Penetrator.
I saw those too.
Which is almost like a. I don't want to say a hardened steel slug, but it might be steel. It might be a steel slug that has like a wad around it or something. I don't remember the exact, but I know it's heavy and I know it's hot and it penetrates like 1,600 feet per second. And then they've got their Home Defender, which is also a slug. It's a hardened alloy Foster slug. So shotguns are awesome. That's how I will end this podcast today.
Shotguns.
I love shotguns, and I'm a big fan of 12 gauge slugs when it comes to just making holes in things and destroying things. They'll definitely do it. And I think that people tend to discount the fact that a shotgun's a very utilitarian, gun that can do a lot of different things. So, we wanted to kind of get your minds working on this caliber debate, right? Yep. I know we discussed some of the ones we like, and I've never met a cartridge I didn't like, so I'm not going to say I don't like any of the cartridges I mentioned. And we didn't get to talk about some of my other favorite cartridges. We didn't even get into black powder. And things like that, and cannons and things. I'm a gun guy. I love it all, right? But maybe this got the juices flowing, and maybe we talked about some things you've never heard of, and it might merit some future research.
Yeah, and I think the most important takeaway from this is, guys, don't worry so much about what somebody else is shooting. If what you're shooting makes you happy and it works for you, then shoot it. Don't get caught up in what somebody says is a better round, because guess what? They're not you. If you mastered that particular rifle or that particular round, then it doesn't matter. Shoot what you shoot.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to just try new things, right? I mean, if you're at the range and somebody wants to let you, try out their gun that you've never fired before, like, take a chance. Like, just give it a try. You might like it, you know? I know, I'm not going to get into another story. I'll save it for another podcast. But that's how Brandy got to liking 40 cal. We were at SHOT Show and she shot a Walther PPQ in 40 and she loved it. She just thought it was great, and she didn't know she was being handed a 40. So we kind of psych ourselves out, right? Like if someone tells you they're handing you XYZ and you're being, shooting something you're not familiar with, well then you might have this preconceived notation, oh, I'm not going to like this. But if you just go into every situation with an open mind, you might find, you know what? Wow, I really like this particular gun or this cartridge. I didn't think I was going to like it. And if you go into it with an open mind, you might find that you'll change your mind pretty quickly. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can go over to Ballistic Ink, pick yourself up a snazzy t-shirt like the ones we're wearing here. Big thanks to all the folks that are watching here on YouTube, as well as those of you that are listening on the podcast forums. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, a bunch of different places. We tune in every Friday for the podcast. The video version of the podcast drops on YouTube on Saturday over on Iraq Veteran 8888. So if you'd like to, tune in on video, you can do that as well. But a big thanks to all the folks that are listening in. Be sure to leave us a great review that helps us show up in the search engine algorithm a little bit better. For the algorithm, y'all.
Algorithm.
Thank you very much. Have a great week. We try our best to post every Friday. Sometimes we might have a little bit of lapse in coverage, but we try our best to keep these episodes flowing. So thank you for supporting us, and we hope to see you soon. Have a great week. Many more on the way.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Life, Liberty, and Pursuit. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate that. You can support us over on Ballistic Ink by picking yourself up some merch. And remember, guys, dangerous freedom. Have a good one.